Okay, so where did we end up? I think we ended up with Nuada getting his hand restored. First replaced with silver, then eventually a flesh and bone hand again. So he's restored, his blemish has been lifted, he is now fit to serve as king again. But Brez is already on the throne. But he's hostile, he doesn't hold up to the tradition of hospitality. He isn't open-handed, as it says, he's not a very caring or generous king, which causes frowns to appear amongst the people. He also imposes heavy taxes. Brez being part Fomorian, which is another people that are in conflict with the Tuatha Dé Danann, he imposes heavy taxes on the part of the Fomorians. So he oppresses the Tuatha Dé Danann. Okay, so the people, as Nuada is now restored, they go to Brez, they tell him, step down, your time is over, our king is back, give him back his throne. So Brez does this, although he doesn't take this lightly, and being without knowledge of who his father is, he goes to his mother, asks her, she tells him. Brez then pursues his father, who is Fomorian, in order to gain an ally in coming back and reclaiming the throne that has just been taken from him, or that he had to give up. So that's where we are. Now, I'm going to approach this one the same way I did the last video. I'm going to I'm going to run over the story, pick out the kind of more salient points to it, and then just comment on it at the end, Okay, so we'll continue. The next time we meet Nuada, he's throwing a feast. He has his throne back, he has his people back, he has his hand back, he has his perfection back, So he's throwing a feast at the Hill of Tara, and a youth approaches looking for entrance in. So he approaches the two gatekeepers, and they ask him who he is. He explains that he is Lugh, L-U-G-H, son of Keen, who is a part of the Tuatha Dé Danann, and a grandson of Balor, who is the ruler of the Fomorians. So you have, just like Brez, part Tuatha Dé Danann, part Fomorian, embodied in the one person. He's refused entrance. They ask him what skills he possesses, as nobody is allowed entrance unless they possess some sort of craft or some sort of skill. Good thinking. He then lists off a list. He lists off a list. He gives a list of some of the accolades that he has: smith, physician, warrior, poet, musician. He's refused entry, as the gatekeepers tell him that they already have a person that fills that position inside of Tara, so entrance is not given. Lugh, however, asks the two gatekeepers to go and pose the question to King Nuada: does he possess one person in his tribe that holds all of those traits, that can encapsulate or embody all of those traits? And essentially, is there anybody that is singly as skilled as Lugh in here? Nuada tells the gatekeepers to go and test this young fella in a game of chess. See how talented he is, see how skilled he is. Again, there's trials involved here. Lugh overcomes everybody he plays against. He's then admitted into Tara, into the feast, amongst everybody else. He then spends the evening serenading, making them laugh, telling jokes, playing music, and reciting poetry. He has them all fall asleep. He has them in the palm of his hand, basically. And Nuada, seeing this, he begins to think that maybe through this person's leadership, as he's so multi-talented and skilled, they might be able to overcome the burdensome taxes that have been imposed from the Fomorians. So what he does is he decides to offer Lugh his throne put Lugh on the throne for a short period. It's not forever. It's just for a period. Another trial. He's given them the test, basically. Okay, so now you have Lugh, who has decided, he's come to Tara and he has decided to join his father's people against the Fomorians. His father, Keen. He's decided to join Nuada's people against the Fomorians. So he begins to think of a plan. And he goes to a place called Grelach Dolaid. Again, fucking killing these Irish things. But we'll move on. Now he goes there with Nuada and the Dagda, and with Ogma and Gobnu and Diankecht. So he goes there with some of the more notable gods of the Tuatha Dé Danann. And they stay there for a full year making plans together in secret, the way the Fomor would not know they were going to rise against them till such time as all would be ready, until they would know that what their strength was. And it is from the council the place God got the name afterwards of the Whisper of the Men of Dee, or Day. And they broke up the council and agreed to meet again that day 3 years later. So they meet again, same people, in this spot 3 years later. We can see in this kind of, it harkens back to the Nuada story as well, of the idea of postponing things. You know, the idea of pushing time back a bit and waiting, patience. So they all go their separate way, and Lugh goes back to his friends. So some time passes, and next we find Nuada is holding an assembly at the hill of Uisneach at Tara, and they see someone coming whose face they say is like the setting sun. So they were so bright that they weren't able to look upon his face. And they find out that it's Lugh, or Lugh Lo Vada, Lugh of the Long Hand. And he's brought people with him. He's brought the riders of the She from the Land of Promise. He's brought his own foster brothers. And he's also come decked out. He has Manannan's horse, the Umvar, of the one mane under him. That was as swift as the naked cold wind of spring, as they say. And the sea was the same as dry land to her, and the rider was never killed off her back. He also had Manannan MacLear's breastplate on him, that kept whoever was wearing it from wounds, and a helmet on his head with 2 beautiful precious stones set in the front of it and one at the back. When he took it off, again more sun imagery. His forehead was like the sun on a dry summer day. So the kid is looking good. Like. He also has Manannan's sword, again Manannan being his foster father, his foster grandfather, called the Fragarach, or the Answerer. Again, this sword is said to strike fear into anyone who opposes him. You know, the usual kind of magic sword. So he gets there. He gets there with his kid on. He gets there with his confidence. He gets there with the people he's brought. He gets there with his horse. And he's talking to the Tuatha Dé Danann. And just as he's doing so, another group comes. A good number of them. And it's the Fomorians. And they've come to claim their taxes. And of course everybody gets up and salutes and welcomes them. And Lugh is wondering why. He questions the king as to why they're giving these people such a warm welcome. And the king says that they have to. They can't slight these people in any way or there'll be damage done. So Lugh isn't taking any of that. He decides he's going to go single-handedly and get rid of these people. So he takes out eight ninths of them. He leaves the final ninth like something out of a movie, you know. He leaves them as a messenger to go and tell their people what has happened here. Which of course this person does. He goes and tells Balor or Balor of the Evil Eye, the tyrant or the king of the Fomorians, what's after happening. And Balor inquires as to who this person was. And I didn't go into it, but there's talks of Lugh's birth as well, and as usual with heroes or any kind of leading characters and stories, the birth is always steeped in magic, steeped in interesting things and kind of treachery and secrets and, you know, magic, basically heroic, surviving insurmountable odds as a baby, you know. But as I think I said already, that Lugh is actually the grandfather of, sorry, not the grandfather, the grandson of Balor. So Lugh is after taking out a good many of his own people, half his own people on his mother's side. So Balor understands this now, that it's his grandson, and there's been a prophecy that once Balor's grandson shows himself in Ireland, that the Fomorians they'll never have power in the country again. And it's at this time that Brez goes to Balor and asks for his help in going and conquering Ireland. So Balor grants him ships and some support in terms of numbers to go and conquer Ireland. So Brez sets sail. He's going getting this place back, you know, and he decides he lands in Connacht, he lands in Connacht, and he destroys it, takes over it. And the king of Connacht at the time is Bove Derrick, the son of the Dagda. So now we're with Lugh, and he gets to understand that the Fomorians are after landing in the country. So he starts going to rally people and get the support and get everything all ready. And he goes and asks Nuada for his support and his help, but Nuada doesn't seem that interested in avenging somebody from a different province, which is interesting. But Lugh doesn't like that, so he goes and he continues on anyway. And he goes and he meets into his father and his father's two brothers, and asks of their help to go and round up the rest of the help from the country. And they go and do that. But Lugh's father, Keen, on his travels, he sees the sons of Tyrone, who are in conflict with Keen and his brothers. So there's a rivalry there, 3 brothers on each side. Because Keen is on his own, he decides to try and hide from the other 3 brothers. So he turns himself into a pig, and he's just rotting around on the ground with the other pigs. Now the other brothers, the sons of Tyrone, they realise this. They turn into hounds. They chase the pig down. They chase Keen down. They eventually catch him, and they kill him. But before they kill him, they allow him to turn back into his human body. So he goes from being the pig back to Keen again. And they kill him by stoning him to death. And they try and commit his body to the ground. They try and bury him 6 times, but the earth doesn't accept it. The earth pushes Keen back up again, pushes the body back up again. But on the 7th attempt, the body remains buried. So back to Lugh. I'll go over this quickly. Lugh eventually, he meets into the invading army, which is Brez and other people. And there's a battle, and Lugh wins, but he spares Brez's life with the terms that Brez will go back to the country of the Fomorians. He will get all of the Fomorians to come, and there will be one final battle between both parties. So Lugh agrees to this, and he allows Brez and his people back. So battle over, Lugh then subsequently learns of his father's death. The earth, he goes to where his father's buried, and the earth tells him what has happened and who has done it. So Lugh gets back to Tara. he holds a council or a big assembly, and he starts to speak of his father's death. He starts to offer out reasons or maybe hints that he might be of a forgiving nature should that person come forward and pay some sort of restitution or fine. So the brothers that killed him, Brian and his brothers, they step forward because they believe that Lugh was addressing them, so they believe it best to take some sort of action, and they come forward and they say that even though they haven't killed, it wasn't them who killed Lugh's father, they would gladly go and seek the fine. They'll pay the fine. So Lugh agrees, and the fine he offers them is to get 3 apples, a skin of a pig, a spear, not a pear, 2 horses, a chariot, 7 pigs, a dog's whelp, a cooking spit, and 3 shouts on a hill. The other brothers agree. They think this is very lenient and it's pretty easily done. However, it unfolds that each of these treasures is incredibly hard to get, and it belongs to it belongs to very powerful people. So he's given the brothers a seemingly impossible task to overcome. I'm not going to go into the whole story, but it's an interesting read. So the brothers they get pretty close to accomplishing the thing, but Lugh kind of steps in and he doesn't ultimately allow them to pay off the fine, So in the end, the choice, it's in Lugh's hands whether he wants these brothers to live or not, and he lets them die. And the story seems like it's kind of just sidetracked and off the point, but I think I might be able to pull it together a little bit when I finish the overall story. And keep in mind as well, I suppose, that all of these treasures that the Brian and his brothers are sent to get, they all possess some sort of magical property. Most of them did anyway, possess some sort of magical property. And Lugh, of course, he would have been in need of these weapons or treasures in the upcoming major battle with the Fomorians. But this is kind of what is the phrase gone out of my head? Kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Not only do you get these useful weapons, but you also get to avenge your father's death. And so we're ready for battle, and Lugh has all of his people lined up, and he's asking them what can they offer Lugh in terms of the war, what can they offer in terms of the battle. So he asks the magician what he can do. The magician says, through my power I can throw down all the mountains of Ireland on the Fomorians. So you're talking about earth, land. He asks the cupbearers what they can give. They say, we will put a strong thirst on the Fomorians. They also say that they will dry up the 12 rivers of Ireland. 12 is an interesting number, but they'll dry up the 12 rivers of Ireland if the Fomorians seek to quench their thirst in those rivers. But they'll make the water abundant for the Tuatha Dé Danann and for Lugh. So you're dealing with water, earth, water. When one of the druids is asked, he says, it is what I will do. I will cause 3 showers of fire to pour on the faces of the army of the Fomor. So now you're bringing in fire. So you have earth, water, fire. And the 4th is the poet, the son of Aideen. When he's asked what he can do, he said, it is not hard to say that. I will make a satire on them at sunrise, and the wind from the north, and I on a hilltop, and my back on a thorn tree, and a stone on a thorn in my hand, and with that satire I'll put shame on them, and enchantment, that they'll not be able to stand against fighting men. So he's including the wind. He's using the north wind. So 4 elements. Lugh continues. He asks a smith. His smith tells him that his swords will be repaired whenever they're broken. They all have something to offer. everybody brings their services to the table in terms of this forthcoming battle. So everyone is ready, everyone's doing their part, everyone's contributing, and the battle commences. But the Fomorians are incredibly strong. There's loads of them. There's a powerful army, and they appear to be winning. Balor of the Evil Eye also happens to kill Nuada, the king of the Tuatha Dé Danann. But Lugh rallies his people. He inspires them. He sings to them. He tells them that it's better to die fighting than it is to just kind of back down and be someone's slave, essentially. He also challenges Balor of the Evil Eye, and he ends up killing him and beheading him. He ends up destroying his eye and killing him, cutting his head off. Ha ha ha. So we end up having just Brez left. And Brez pleads for his life, and he offers to Lugh that he will teach Lugh the way of agriculture, the way of farming, the way of making sure you have a produce every year or every quarter. And Lugh agrees to this, so he allows Brez to live. So the battle is done. Lugh wins. He's vanquished the enemy. The Fomorians end up being run out of the country. There's not many of them left, and they never come back. And it's through the lineage of Lugh that you get Cuchulainn. You get the more, I suppose, if you're looking at it through a literal perspective, you get the more historically sound or historically verifiable people. So yeah, but I get into some notes about it now, or some comments on it, and I know this is long and probably dull, but I think picking some meaning out of it is always a worthwhile pursuit, Okay, so we're moving on, and we're going to comment on the story now. And what I'm going to do here is, I suppose, psychologizing a little bit. Like, I'm going to look at all characters in here as aspects of ourself, our internal dialogue, different voices we have, will I do this? No, I look stupid. That kind of a thing. So each character represents a different aspect of ourself, different aspect of our relationships with other people, or a different aspect of our relationships with ourselves and with the world. And again, I'm not offering a definitive statement on that meaning behind any of these myths. I'm just saying that you can look at things this way, and I believe there's stuff to get out of it. There's positive things to take out of it. You can make up your own mind. So we'll push on, and we're at the start. We're introduced to Lugh. Lugh goes to Tara and the Hill of Tara, and he wants to be left into the feast. He wants to be allowed in with the other people, his people. He thinks, but nobody is allowed into Tara unless they have a craft or a trait or a gift or a creative ability or something useful, And I suppose that's a good part of our personality is like that as well, or our character, is we tend not to do things without meaning. There's very few meaningless tasks, you can tell a lot about, I suppose, yourself and about people or even things by what they do, what is the action that they do and what is the intent and purpose behind it. And also we tend to hold on to useful things, we tend to hold on to patterns of behaviour that form some sort of a cohesion in us, Now, yeah, I'll get to that. Lugh is finally allowed in as he possesses all of the traits of everybody inside in Tara. They all have their own individual skills, but Lugh alone possesses all of them together. Now, what this says to me is that Lugh, and there's a little bit more evidence of this as you go, that Lugh represents the individual self. In regards that while there is individual traits or different traits in a person, those traits also belong to that person or they're of that person. So who is the person? To me, Lugh represents the totality of the individual or the self, as he possesses all of the traits in and of himself. And again, Lugh is equated further on in the story with the sun 2 or 3 times as a bright, shining, hard to look at sun. Yet his face is equated with the sun. And also the beginning of the word Lugh, the Lu, it's the same kind of root word as the word lux, which is light, and also luminescence or luminosity, to illuminate, to shine. So we have the word Lugh meaning shine, and he's equated with the sun. The sun is also equated or symbolic of the self in terms of astrology and in terms of the tarot cards as well. There's a strong emphasis on identity, core identity, in terms of the sun. Now you have the juxtaposition as well also of Nuada, who had the silver hand, silver arm, which was equated with the moon, the lunar, or the unconscious, unknown aspects, parts that are partly seen. And then you have the solar with Lugh, which is the sun, which is the obvious, the in your face, the bright, the very apparent. So we have, for the first time in the story and in life as well, as we take our throne with Nuada, partly injured but partly recovered, we take our throne, we become a little bit kind of who we are, Then we get a glimpse of who we could be in Lugh, the possessor of all traits. Now, Nuada tests Lugh, and Lugh overcomes these tests, little trials. I suppose in our formative years or our early adolescence, teenage years, we kind of maybe might take one step into being who we are, tacitly, and then step back again. Little by little we try and show ourselves to the world. And if it's not too frightful or we don't get knocked back too much, maybe we show another little bit. These are all trials that we undergo ourselves, or we neglect to undergo. We don't take it upon ourselves to push ourselves out into the world. And there is no standing still in terms of life or in terms of our wellness or our psychological development. There is no standing still. You're either moving forward and growing, or you'll just fall apart and crumble. You'll turn to just nothing, really. You'll regress. You'll turn back into an infant that doesn't know how to do anything for itself. So we have the trial period. And once we get comfortable, we're kind of realising that, hang on a bit, it's okay being me, I can speak in public, I have friends, I might be good at a couple of things, things are okay, I'm not that scared of the world anymore, or maybe not as much as I used to be. We might allow that person or that part of ourselves to kind of take control, and in the story Nuada gives up the throne to Lugh for a period, again another trial. And this can represent like a moving from one stage to another, having the humility to recognize that there's a better part of myself being shown here that I might want to become a bit more of. By giving over the throne to Lugh, we're also accepting our own limitations. We're accepting that we don't have all the answers, that there's still parts of us that need to grow and develop. And also there's a nice humility in terms of accepting our complicity in our own pain. And that's not to say that we have caused our own pain, but it's our complicity in what we do with that. It's no good to recognize that, yeah, I've experienced X amount of trauma in my life, but also I'm just going to continue waving the finger at that and saying, look how terrible this is for me. That doesn't get you anywhere. And while of course you need to recognize that, and I'm not saying to forget that or to deny that to yourself, what I am saying is that it's up to you what you do with that. And recognizing that as your own story and your own history, it then gives the choice to you. If you don't accept it, or if you never look at that aspect of yourself that badly, that wounded part of you, the choice doesn't even come into the equation of what you do with it, because you're not accepting it. So you might continue on being hurt and being wounded and treating others as a result of that hurt. And what goes along with that is the blame, the projection of our own distaste or our own unrefined traits onto others, or even our good aspects, in particular. So the choice, the humility to accept, yes, I was complicit in that. I was hurt, I was wounded, I continued to blame. And of course, always grab evil by the throat, never let that go. But because we can accept the evil that might have been done to us, number one, we now know what evil is. We can see it, we should be able to smell it, and we should be able to deal with it. But number two, and it's kind of a separate issue, but they're bound together as well, is we now have to decide what we do with ourselves and as a result of our pain. We can stay and play the victim card, or out of those ashes, we can mold something. We can mold ourselves, we can build ourselves back up. So you have two choices: play the victim or play the creator. So we have Lugh agrees to fight on the side of his people, on the side of Nuada's people. So you have a meeting. You have himself, Nuada, Nuada, the Dagda, Ogma, Gobnu, and Yankekt, and Lugh all meet and they plan. They meet up to make plans together. And they stay there for a year making plans, and then when they disperse, they agree to meet 3 years later on the same day in the same place. So what this represents is ritual, a coming together, because the people, the Nuada and the Dagda, etc., they all represent different traits, different abilities, and then Lugh then representing the self. It's kind of sitting with yourself, getting to understand what you're capable of, getting to know yourself in a alone time as well, and ritual of, and again, in terms of time, being able to make plans, push things back, delay gratification, be mature, make decisions in terms of long-term thinking, stick to them, know your own abilities, know your traits, know your strengths, and be able to formulate plans, desires, and overall goals which are directly related to them, which intrinsically kind of benefit you and put you on the best path available to getting what you want. There's no point in wanting to be a singer if you can't sing, etc. If you're a good writer, write, try things, find things out, discover who you are. And the idea of the Lugh being the representation of the sun is, it represents action. The solar represents action, taking action as a self, as an individual. It doesn't mean if all of your friends are just into soccer and you don't, you happen to enjoy playing the fiddle, or fixing shoes or dancing, whatever. It doesn't mean that you sacrifice that part of yourself just to fit in. that's not the heroic way. That's not going to lead to any kind of long-term fulfillment. It will lead towards a sense of shame in yourself for not feeling like you can follow this interest of yours, and also resentment, because you will grow to hate your friends, because you will see them as a reason why you can't follow what it is you want to do, even though you might now have never brought the idea up at them, you know. So if you're constantly looking for your crowd of friends to swing round towards your interests so you can actually go and follow them up, you're going to be sorrowly mistaken, because that time won't come. You know, it won't come. And it's not fair on you to expect that either. You can't expect people to always want to do what you want. Of course, as people, it'd feel much easier if everybody wanted to do what we wanted and share the same interests. But we might find that we would gradually lose those interests if everybody else was doing it too, you know. So yeah, we have the meeting. In terms of ritual, they agree to meet again in 3 years. And then the interesting thing is, it says Lugh went back to his own friends, which it's not just kind of sitting in home and reflecting on how great you are, or how intelligent you are, or how spiritual you are, you know, or how in touch with your emotions you are, or how much you know about the world through watching documentaries or through reading or through whatever it is you're doing, you know. It's not just about that. As I was saying a minute ago, that it's bound to fail if it's not built on action, you know. And you see, yeah, of course, and you need to test yourself as well. Sorry, by just bringing yourself. Yes, sure. There's great merit in periods of self-reflection and self-discovery, but also it stands to naught if it's you that is judging these aspects of yourself, you know. Because we like to. There's two sides really. We like to kind of flagellate ourselves and say we're not worth much, but we also like to think of ourselves as fundamentally godlike. And there's nothing wrong with that if you can couple that with experiential learning, you know, introducing those parts of yourself that you spent so much time getting to know or discovering or unearthing. Introduce those parts of yourself to the world through your friends, through groups who have shared interests, you know, through classes, through volunteer work, through just general work, you know. Introduce those things, do speeches, play music, do the dancing, whatever it is. Introduce those aspects of ourselves to the world. And it's through that we kind of, we're forced to grow then, you know, because we will meet challenge that way, because not everybody will agree with us, nor should they. We might actually offend people, we might bother people, we might shake their thinking a little bit, and they won't enjoy that. And they might seek to kind of make a fool of you or prove to you in front of people how you're wrong, you know. And good, let them, and accept that, you know. Sure, it might sting a little bit if you're put on the spot and you can't kind of justify something, but it's okay. That's part of it. It doesn't mean you go back to just navel gazing in your room, as they say, you know, just kind of self-reflecting about self-reflecting for the sake of self-reflecting, you know. There has to be some kind of end goal or some kind of active measure involved in it. So yeah, we must have our opinions tested. It's not enough to kind of have these strong opinions and beliefs about ourselves in home, but when we go outside, then we're not able to voice them. We refuse to air them in public. We don't have any beliefs according to other people, you know. When I'm with other people, I just believe what everyone else is because it's not worth my while. I don't want the argument. It's not worth the hassle, etc., etc. You hear this from people all the time, you know. Oh, why would you be going around saying that? Like, you could be offending people. And that should not allow you, or that should not be a reason for you not to kind of assert some form of opinion, you know, an intelligent opinion, a well thought out opinion, you know. Don't let any of that stuff stop you. Because it's how we get refined, the sword passes through the fire. And the greatest fire for people tends to be public opinion, So if you want sharp edges, man, you kind of need to bring yourself into the public and make yourself heard and make yourself a little known. Like, I don't mean in terms of popularity or fame, but is the person who you've cultivated inside, is that being expressed? Because it must be expressed, because as I was saying earlier, otherwise you develop elements of shame and self-loathing around the idea that why aren't I going out and making myself known? Like, why aren't I speaking up? Why aren't I saying what I think in public? And again, you might end up just hating people or yourself as a result of that. And it's very blunt anyway, to not speak your turn, to not speak your opinion. And you see that the worst thing that can happen, and you see this so often, is that this kind of behavior is kind of rewarded. It's promoted. You see it especially in real new age kinds, in the extreme kind. Like, it's okay to have positive thinking and to believe that you reap what you sow and all of that kind of stuff. But when it's taken to extremes, it can serve to neuter active behavior or assertive behavior. The idea that everything is just experience. It's all just experience. You're not meant to judge, man. You're just meant to kind of stand back and observe and take things for what they are. That is a terrible attitude, in my opinion. Because that justifies everything, You stand back and allow everything to happen, because there is no... If all is experience, then one thing isn't better than the other. There is no worse way of behaving than the next. So who are you to make any kind of assertive statement in terms of standing towards evil? And especially the law of attraction in terms of The Secret. If you desire something long enough, or you think about it positively, you'll attract it into your life. You won't. You'll just sit around thinking about something and not actually doing anything about it. There has to be action. So if you're saying to me, if you envision or you imagine this future you'd like, and day to day you're putting in the action, you're putting in steps that will get you there, then you might end up getting it. Of course. But it's all predicated on action. Another arrogant attitude, or an attitude that could be considered arrogant, is the idea of transcending emotion, becoming so spiritually illuminated that you no longer experience emotion. Things happen, doesn't bother you, doesn't matter if people smile or grimace at you. These things don't matter. You can kind of just take things as they go and transcend emotion. You speak in a stupid voice, you speak with this fake tranquility. The waters aren't moving, there's no waves or undercurrents, it just is. And this kind of, it can serve to belittle people. If people get passionate or they get angry about anything, if you're surrounded by people that hold that kind of, the idea that emotion is something that should be transcended, they see themselves as above you in some way. That like you're still so little developed or so little evolved that you're still succumbing to, or you're still being motivated by emotion. And we all are. Emotion guides us. It tells us what our feeling is around the world, how we're feeling about things. It doesn't mean we have to act in ways that would be consistent with that. Like if I'm angry, it doesn't mean I have to smash someone up. It just means that you kind of use your self-reflection then to look at yourself and just, again, going back to the hand, the silver hand, addressing our hurt or addressing our happiness even, you know. Yes, and then the last thing then is just the acceptance of all things is the same, you know. There is no moral delineation between things. There's no difference. Moral relativism, it's all the same, you know. As long as they're happy, as long as they're not hurting anybody, then let them do what they want. But again, you can decide, I suppose, if you accept that there is no better way of being than another, you know. Is there a good way of living as opposed to a bad way? Because if you answer yes to either of them, you're assuming the other. So if you tell me that there's no good way of living, I suppose you need to be pretty consistent with that, you know. So talking of action and following on from action, we next meet Lugh, possibly the 3 years later, but maybe not. And he's flashy, you know. He has, what does he have? My mind is gone. He has Manannan's horse, he has his sword, he has his breastplate, he has decorative head decorations, he has jewels in them. You know, he's ready to go. Like, he has a sword called the Fragarak, which is the answer, which is representative of, you know, a keen mind, a keen thought, or keen ability to think, you know, a razor sharp intellect. The answer, you know, we speak our answers, we know our answers, we act our answers. And the sword is, again, going into the tarot cards, the sword represents the intellect or the thinking, you know, our communication. So our thinking, Lugh's thinking it's become the answer, you know, it's become the way forward. And it said that just seeing this sword would drain the strength from the enemies. And again, if this is building on the action and the idea of developing your personality, if you have become a little bit confident in that and you're stepping out into the world and you're okay being who you are, and you're okay with having people deny you or argue against you, if you still speak what you hold to be meaningful, just watch people buckle before you. You know, when people realize you can't be shaken from what you believe or what you think, wow, you know, you win. You win that game of being pulled in under the waters and drowned anyway by other people's stupid opinions, you know. Because be realistic, most people's opinions they don't work for you. They're not going to enrich you in any way. So is there any real need to be getting kind of caught up in what other people might believe or think about you? Because it doesn't matter. Like, if they think something, you're never going to prove to everyone why they're wrong or why you are this way as opposed to that way. So it's wasted energy, you know. And that energy is best put into developing our own crafts, you know, our own skills, our own abilities. Remember, nobody is allowed inside the Hill of Tara without one. You know, nobody's allowed in the place of the gods, in place of the rulers, in place of the kings without a craft. Don't come here empty-handed. So Lugh says no to the tax collectors, you know, and he kills a lot of them. He leaves, some of them then go back to tell their people what he's after doing. Carry the message, you know. And you can look at this as two ways, but it doesn't really matter. You can look at it as in terms of an individual overcoming the opinion of the herd or the masses. But I think more innate than that, it's the person overcoming that aspect of themselves that requires the approval of others. You know, always try as much as possible, internalize it and see where the source of this external behaviour is coming from in ourselves. You know, and that's not to say that everything that happens is a result of ourselves or we only have ourselves to blame for everything. that's not true. People can do horrendous things to you without you needing that or desiring that or inviting that on in any way. We have free will and all that goes along with that. So if people are going to be evil or act in bad ways, the best we can do is understand that, identify it, and prepare for that, and be able to deal with that. Instead of just wishing everyone would be lovely, because they won't be. So yes, overcoming that aspect of ourselves that needs others' approval, but not denying that. We can't just say, oh well, most people do say it, and it's clearly not true, like that. Oh well, I don't care what people think of me. Well, you probably should. If you're going to be a person worthwhile in any way, you're probably going to end up in a position where people might listen to you. And if you don't care what they think of you, if you don't care if they aspire to be like you in some way, or they admire something about you, then you're never going to hone anything in anybody. You're never going to be of use to anybody. So it's not so much that you shouldn't care what people think of you. You shouldn't allow what people think of you change your mind or change your ways of behaving, if they're coming from a true and natural, kind of organically inquisitive and imaginative place in yourself. As long as they're not built on infringing in anyone's space, infringing in anyone's autonomy, then go for it. And don't let other people's opinions sway you from that course. It doesn't mean you shouldn't care what they think. It just means that what they think matters little to you. Because we would like it if people approved of what we were doing, or if we were valued by other people. We all need that. Not by everyone, but by people that are kind of close to us, so that we run into most times. So to deny that you care, or to deny that people's opinions bother you, it's not necessarily true. So what about the boys, the Brian and the two brothers, the sons of Turin, killing Lugh's father? And it's interesting because they're from the same side, essentially. They're both part of the Tuatha De Danann, whatever you want to call them. So they're from the same side, they're of the same people, which for our purposes would indicate they're of the same self. They're aspects of self, aspects of ourselves. So this aspect chases down Lugh's father, forces him to become a pig, kills him as a pig, but then allows him to die in his mortal form. So as we get older, as we enter into teenage years, like, we kind of get a little bit cocksure of ourselves. We kind of stay out a little bit later. On the weekends we might vanish altogether. We're out of the house most of the day. We're away from our parents. We become more of young adults, young people, as opposed to children. We kind of leave those clothes behind us, and we become a little bit more active in the world, and a little bit more assertive in our behaviour and our attitudes. Even the music we listen to, the stupid haircuts we might have. So we tend to leave our parents behind us a little bit, and as boys, especially in the case of Lugh, we might tend to disregard, or to kind of, I suppose, turn our father into a pig, into a swine, humiliate him in our minds, or belittle him in our own heads, belittle our own idea of what our father is as a man, or as a father, or as a person, and then kind of disregard that and say, I don't need that, I don't need anything from him, and maybe so, maybe so. But the interesting thing is when the lads kill Brian, or when Brian and them kill Keane, they try and bury him 6 times, but the earth won't accept it. The earth being a symbol of the goddess being female or feminine, and these being tied to unconscious processes, or the underworld, or aspects of everyday living that aren't seen or dealt with, you know. So we might try and bury our father, but we can't, you know. We might, but it takes serious effort. On the seventh attempt, he stayed under the ground, you know. But much to their dismay, the earth again, it speaks of what has occurred there. It tells Lugh what has happened, you know. So Lugh goes about avenging his father. And he sends the people who have killed his father off on his voyage to pursue and attain weapons or treasures for Lugh in order that he might use them in the coming battle against the Fomorians. Great. So, whilst we might have buried our father and assumed that he had nothing to offer us, that is not our whole selves that believe that, you know. Because while we might love and care for our father, on the one hand, we could also think that we've nothing to learn from him. So we can have diverging opinions on our parents, you know. It's kind of bringing them into unity, or to allowing them to kind of become more fully developed and be a more focused opinion or idea about our parents is the goal here, like, you know. And that doesn't mean you have to swing it around to think positively about them. You don't really. But it's kind of what they symbolise that's a little bit more important than the personal parent, you know. By burying our father, we're denying, I suppose, our lineage and what has come before us, you know. And we find that those aspects of ourselves that sought to get rid of our father, or to deny that the elderly had anything to teach us, you know. And you see that's so common these days, that if it happened yesterday, then it's irrelevant today, you know. Anybody that was born before 2000 or whatever just has nothing to say. They've got nothing to offer, you know. People have no interest in history. They've very little interest in fiction, even less interest in poetry, you know. If it can't turn them on and entertain them in 2 minutes, then be gone with it, you know. And you see this as well in the amount of people that are old people that are allowed, or not allowed, but that are being kind of sent to homes, you know, or left to die alone, not surrounded by grandkids, not surrounded by their children. There's a real disconnect between the foolishness of youth today and the energy of youth today with the wisdom and the control and experience of the elderly today, you know. It's just a serious disconnect. So we can't bury our fathers. The earth will spit them out. It'll resurface in some way, you know. And nor should you want to, really, you know. To deny that age has any bearing on wisdom. In some cases it doesn't, but it's also to kind of fool ourselves into believing that it's only our youth that matters. Because once we're old too, then we will be irrelevant as well. And that's a very tough pill to swallow. Both for men and for women, but probably more so for women. You see the desire to be young, you know. The desire to have this pristine or made up face. The desire to still be living this kind of late teenage lifestyle, you know. So we can bury our fathers, we can bury our parents, we can bury our idea of mortality and growing old, but it will become, it could become a problem for us, you know. And also what we find then is that while those aspects of ourselves that sought to bury the father, they're sent out, they come back with treasures, you know. They're tested, they're put through the ringer by Lugh, you know. They're sent on trials that are seemingly impossible, you know. So the idea could be about trying to kind of smooth out the rough edges of our character, you know. Be gone with those youthful arrogances that I was speaking of a minute ago, you know. Be gone with them, become a more mature person, become a more sensible person. And by Lugh attempting to honour his father's life and seek revenge, he's also allowing his father into his life, by getting to know him, or through allowing his name to be continued to be spoken. And as a result of that, he gets treasures. So by us looking back, speaking with older people, speaking with our grandparents, reading books that were written 200 years ago, or written 100 years ago, listening to what others had to say before we were born, we're kind of opening up that line of communication, and we're gaining treasures as a result. Most of the most interesting conversations I've had are with people that never spoke to me, And again, you see it, I see it with young fellas these days. I'm sure it's with girls as well, but I'm just talking about boys here. The super fixation on the peer group. There doesn't seem to be much movement in terms of getting out of that. It's fine when you're 13 or 12 and you've no idea what's going on in the world, so you kind of band together. But when you're 19, 20, 21, 22 and you're still all hanging around together every day, none of you are kind of forging any sense of individual identity. That is not healthy. It doesn't mean you shouldn't have friends, but in terms of kind of separating yourself and striking out on your own path, that is where the treasures are gained. That's where knowledge is gained, and by opening yourself up to learning from older generations, that'll help to ripen you and mature you a bit. Because if you're constantly around people of a similar age to you, where's the wisdom coming from? It comes from mistakes, which is good in itself, but if you're constantly making mistakes, and if you're with a crowd of people that kind of would gloss over those mistakes, and again, no one really wants to call out poor behaviour in other people, then is that really a healthy path for you to be entering into adulthood on? So Lugh gets the treasures. He enters the battle. And he kills Balor of the Evil Eye, He overcomes a tyrant. He overcomes the destroyer of things, the destroyer of his land, And interestingly as well, is Lugh is actually the grandson of Balor. So we have the story of overcoming our relationship with our father, and also the idea of overcoming our grandfather. In this case, it happens to be tyrannical, so it could stand for systems or I can't think of another word. Yeah, systems of governance, or systems of ways of being or seeing in the world that have kind of been here long before we got here, as our grandfather would have been, So by destroying that, or by stepping up to that, you don't have to destroy it necessarily, but just by taking a stand against that, that is the ultimate development in a human being, in a hero, in a man, in a woman as well. You grow from getting to know yourself, getting to know your hurt, getting to know your potential, your skills, your abilities, forming groups, forming friendships, becoming a bit of a leader, being able to distance yourself from the crowd, being able to forge your own path, being the judge of your own opinions, being your own compass, and then taking a stand and speaking truth into the world, speaking your meaningful opinions and your meaningful beliefs into the world, and being willing to kind of be washed away with nothing left but those. That is the defining characteristic of people who shape the world. Men, women, dogs even, courageous dogs. It all springs from the same source, action, autonomy, truth, fearless reflection on yourself, ultra humility with yourself, and ultra gentleness with yourself. Because the world will be savage enough to you on its own. It doesn't need your help. You do though. You do need your help. So go along with that. And then all that's left in the story then is Brez, whose life is spared by Lugh, as Brez tells Lugh that he will tell him the secrets, or he'll give him the knowledge of growth, agricultural learning. He'll tell them how to plant, how to sow, how to reap, in order that every quarter, every of the year, they will reap products, constantly nourished. The interesting thing about that, Lugh agrees, is Brez and Lugh are perfect mirrors of each other. Lugh's father is of the Tuatha Dé Danann, his mother is of the Fomorians, and for Brez, his father is of the Fomorians, and his mother is of the Tuatha Dé Danann, and they're perfectly mirrored of each other, And the idea about that is, we all have an aspect of ourselves or a side of ourselves that seeks to kind of limit ourselves or destroy ourselves, or is not very nice, or is incapable of allowing ourselves to heal, And the idea that instead of seeking to destroy this or to take Brez's life, there's a deal made, That aspect of Lugh, which allows him to grow by understanding the totality of himself. That's better than just killing those aspects of ourselves, because we probably can't, and then you're just entering into the denial and all the relationships that go along with that again, So ultimately, it ends with us being the source of our own generative abilities. It's ourselves that we live or die. We'll build or crumble depending on our own self. And that's the story of today. It was the story of yesterday, and it'll be the story picked up or neglected tomorrow as well. So have a good evening and good luck.